Now, let's dive into the 4 seasons of the menstrual cycle. And please bear with me if any of you who have tuned in, you're already very familiar with the menstrual cycle and menstrual cycle tracking as well. Feel free to share your experiences in the chat. If you know something and you want to share, you are very welcome. So let's start with the period itself. Many of us are familiar with the duration of what is called menstruation or the period. And this is typically, again, this is just an average. Your period might look very, very different. It is on average around 1 to 5 or 7 days where you actually experience bleeding from the womb space. And this period is a time that is associated with winter, with midnight, with the new moon. And this is a time for rest, restoration, cleansing, deep rejuvenation. So think of it as this blood flow and this river that is flowing from within you, it is flowing down to connect with the source of something greater than yourself. And when we do this, what actually happens is the blood is gently leaving, or the uterus lining is gently being cleansed so that in the next cycle, it can then, with the help of the hormones in your body, estrogen, progesterone, for example, new lining can then reappear and can support you to sustain new life, whether that is in the form of a baby, if you do choose to have a baby and if that is accessible for you, or in the form of your projects, in the form of your relationships, that is also new life. So, as I mentioned, and also Elise mentioned just now, in the past, she says menstrual time was a time of rest. Perhaps for some of us, yes, and for some of us, no. And also in many cultures in the past, what happens is women lived in community, close community, and there was often this idea of an elder woman who is supporting younger women all together so that child rearing, taking care of children, domestic kinds of activities could be shared amongst this community of women. And so no woman would be alone, especially during this time of rest, rejuvenation, nourishment. So during your bleed, especially if you have a challenging bleed, the first thing I want to invite you to do is to acknowledge this time as a time of allowing, as a time of, if it is possible, surrendering to your body and acknowledging that this is a time that your body is sovereign. This is another thing that I would like to also spend a little time chatting about, because in modern society, very often we see our bodies as something we drive, just like a car, just like a tool that enables us to do things out in the world. And many times we ignore the signals from within our body. I wanted to say that the menstrual cycle is a very important indicator of your health in many different ways. So, for example, if you have an irregular cycle, it could point to certain things like hereditary factors that you have, risk factors, or, for example, things like nutrition, whether you are eating well, whether you are stressed, whether you are sleeping well. So all these are closely tied together. And your menstrual cycle, for example, if you've had a regular cycle and it's becoming an irregular cycle, if you've always had an irregular cycle, if you had a regular cycle and now suddenly you're not bleeding, it points to something. It is a sign, and your body is trying to tell you something. So the first thing is to acknowledge your body as a friend or even a roommate, and you're living with this roommate, and you want to, if it's possible, I want to invite you to start to acknowledge this roommate and to give some attention and some space and to allow this roommate to be with you in community rather than saying, no, I take charge of my roommate. I rule over my roommate. And, I am the owner of my body. My mind is superior, or I am superior. I have my will and I'm going to use my body however I want. And this shift, I think, is one of the most powerful shifts that we can make whether you have a menstrual cycle or not, if you're tuning in and you don't have a menstrual cycle, this is also a very powerful shift for you as well. How can we begin to see our bodies as something very precious, something so divine and so important that allows us to go out into the world and to do the things we would like to do and to have the relationships we would like to have and to experience life for all it has, all the sensations, the smells, the richness that life has to offer us. We can only do this through our bodies. If you have any technical difficulties, because I see some comments coming in the chat, feel free to try to refresh your browser, or if you're on the app, what you might try to do is you can try to close the app, restart the app, and then come back to this video, and probably that might be working better. So let's come back to the menstrual cycle. So when we talk about the period, this is a great time for rest. And typically, my teachers, Shani and Alexandra Pope, they are founders of the Red School. So what they recommend during this time of the period is, if it is possible, try to do as little as possible. And this is a time of being in the dichotomy of what is called yin yang. These are two equal forces that underplay everything. And they are like the shifting energies of the day. What is closest to the energy of yin is allowing, is not arguing with reality, but saying, oh, this is what I feel now. My body is telling me I need rest. Okay, I'm going to rest. And even though perhaps I might want to be more productive, or I might not want to experience a painful period, but this being is witnessing. Just like in meditation, also very often in life, there are challenging situations, there are difficult emotions, there is trauma that we might experience. Being is taking the seat of the observer and saying, I witness. And perhaps in a situation, for example, where you cohabit with your body, you live in your body, imagine that. So you're living in this house that is your body, including your menstrual cycle. You say, oh, I'm experiencing a painful period, rather than having the thought, no, I shouldn't have a painful period, or I shouldn't have an irregular cycle. The first thing is to say, oh, this is what I'm experiencing now. How might I work with this? How might I embrace this situation and accept it as it is, even though I have hopes that it might be something different? So, in that present moment, working with the energies that you have and knowing that it will shift. So, this menstruation, just like we are not always in winter and we're not always in the new moon, right? It is a cycle. So, in this period, if it's possible, be as kind to yourself as possible. Hold yourself with gentleness, especially if you notice thoughts of self criticism coming up, if you're someone who is often on the go, if you've had lots of trauma or difficult memories associated with menstruation, with menarche, which is the first time of your bleed. For example, if you go back many, many years during your adolescence and you have some memories of shame, some memories of guilt as associated with your menstrual cycle, how could you go back to that experience and acknowledge and witness this, and at the same time hold yourself with kindness, hold yourself with this love and this forgiveness? It's okay that I felt this way, and there is no right way to be, and not arguing with reality. This is just as it is, and we be. So that is the true wisdom of being. Because in the wisdom of being, the depths of the being, on the other side of this being, what we have is insight, true insight into who you are, what you bring into the world. And this period of menstruation is connected with the water element. Water is closest to the source of everything. And we are mostly made of fluids, of water, and so is the planet. So the water element in the creative cycle, even though it is a cycle, there is no beginning, there's no end. Just like there's no beginning between the chicken and the egg, which one came first, right? If I had to pick some element to start with, I would say it is the water, because all of us came from the womb of someone else. And you have gestated in someone else's womb for 9 months in that watery environment. So in this water, you were born. And in our period, right, when you are having or have had a period, that is a time that you reconnect with that sense of surrender, and you allow yourself to receive, if possible, as much as possible. Receive all that is to receive. This could be joy, this could be silence, this could be pain. And you bear witness to your experience, not arguing with it, not challenging it, not saying that it should be something else. You witness this so that you can let this be your insight. This is a great time to connect with your intuition, to receive insight. If you are working on something at work or your personal projects, or perhaps you feel like you're stuck in a relationship, it's come into a place where you feel blocked and there's something that you can't quite move past it. Use your connection with your period, with the time of your bleed to receive. Ask the question for which you would like to receive an answer, and sincerely connect within. And then be patient and allow the answer to surface. So, this is a great time to do that. And because during your bleed, this is a time, because the menstrual cycle and the uterus lining is being cleansed, it's really, really helpful during this time to avoid eating sugary foods, processed foods. You want to keep the womb space warm. So broths are very helpful. Eating nourishing foods are great. In general, for example, if you do eat meat, lean meat is very, very good and healthy. If you cook chicken broth, this is a good time to drink it. What else? In terms of exercise, if you do experience a painful period, this is a good time to practice restorative yoga, yin yoga, various different poses that can help to create a little bit of light movement without exerting yourself too much. Because remember, this is a time of rest and restoration. If we look at the new moon, if we look at the time of midnight, if we look at the season of winter, what is nature doing? Nature is resting. The animals are in hibernation. The trees have shed all their leaves and they are sending all of the sap from the branches down in through the bark into the roots to prevent themselves from dying. So it's really drawn everything into the source. So you're reconnecting with the source and you don't want to exert yourself too much. So if you're tuning in and you're someone who's like, I really want to go, please, as much as possible, try to take what is called a menstrual break. And I know this sounds a little bit ambitious, especially if this is the first time you've heard of a menstrual break. My own menstrual break is because I work for myself, I've made the choice to transition from a full-time job that has a fixed schedule to something that I can arrange. And it took many years and it took a great degree of hard work and determination to reach here, but this was my choice. And now 3 days before the start of my period, and the first 3 days, because I know that is when I tend to be the most tired, tend to be when I need rest the most, and tend to be when I'm most deeply connected with myself. I choose to dedicate this time 3 days before and 3 days once my period starts for myself, and I do as little external work as possible. This might be, for example, choosing to refuse social interactions at this time, choosing to do fewer, if possible, chores, commitments to others, if possible, of course, with a great degree of support from your partner, from your family, from your friends. And for other people, for example, for you, this menstrual break may look different. It could be, for example, taking 1 week off, and some women do that. It could be, for example, doing a yoga nidra every single day before you start the day. So, how you take your menstrual break or how you choose to allow yourself to embody being during the period of your bleed or even leading up to it will be unique to you. So, this is the only thing I invite you to consider, to be open to trying. And for those of you who are tuning in, I would love for you to share because I've been talking for quite long and I would love for this to be more of an interaction. Have you ever taken a menstrual break? And what does your menstrual break look like, or how would you like your menstrual break to be? Let's take a few moments to share in the chat. Phoebe has shared in the chat, bath. What better way to connect with the water element than to be immersed within a greater holding, which is water itself? Alexandra says, I tried to rest, but I never had a name for it. So I really like this. Yeah, and I even encourage you, those of you who are tuning in, if you feel ready to share this with someone else and say, I'm on my menstrual break. Sorry, I'm not available. And since I've made the choice to do this and share this first with my partner and with my close circle of friends, and now also in my work, I openly say that, oh, I'm on my menstrual break during these days, so I won't be very, very social. I feel like this has is also a very important part of our role to educate others, because as a community, those of us who menstruate, we want to raise awareness of this. There's never been a platform for us to say we should rest. Right? Should be common knowledge. I would like my daughters, I would like my granddaughters, I would like other women that I support and the generations after me to have this right. And also know that in some countries, for example, I believe in Spain, in Japan, there's actually also menstrual leave that you can take from your company. So it's becoming more and more something that people are raising awareness of and that we are acknowledging in society, even though in some industries, especially if you work in engineering, in tech, and you are the minority, then it is something that might be difficult for you to talk about. But I truly believe that we are at the brink of this revolution, of this awareness. We have all this information available, and also we are this generation where we can make the future that we want to see. And even if we did not have this education or information available from before, we have the possibility to educate the next generation. Tammy says, never have taken a menstrual break. I've also recently resigned from working to explore creativity differently. So finding practices that can support me during my cycle. Loving the bath, Phoebe. Yeah. I also love taking baths as well, especially during my period. It's especially if you're having a painful period. I find that very, very helpful for me when doing a yoga nidra in the bath or in a pool. If you have access to a pool, that is very, very helpful to practice a flotation practice that can be really, really helpful. There are other ways to connect with a sense of this water element. Anything that supports you to practice surrendering, allowing, taking pause, relaxing into a space of security and safety, that will help you connect with the feeling of trust. And through this trust, receive insight through your connection, which is your intuition, to something much greater than yourself.